Hey, how's it going, everybody? Frank Barry here with another episode of Modern Church Leader. Super excited about today's guest. As many of you know, the audience of this podcast or this live video show is church leaders. And so we've really tried hard over the course of the last year or year and a half to kind of create a community, get church leaders talking, interview church leaders or people that are impacting the church. And today we are going to talk all about church leadership. So really excited about our episode. Pop your questions in the comments. Let us know if you're kind of interested in this topic, where you're from, who you are, what church you're with, and what questions you have on church leadership. And we might be able to get to some of those. But without further ado, let me bring in our guests. I am joined by Jenny Catron. Hey, Jenny.
Hey, Frank. Great to be with you.
Yes. And the audio video setup is looking good over there. Great job.
Thank you. I got to do a little extra work, to make sure I've got some lighting, and I'm still going with the earbuds though. So people are going to judge me on that. So
classic. It's okay. We've had all kinds of experiences on this show. Like obviously I try to have a decent setup, but we've had people on iPhones. That might be the worst one. And it wasn't bad. It was just an odd one. And it was like vertical,
yes.
So anyways, that's,
Yep.
And then lighting and audio. Luckily, we've never had anybody completely like internet die and show's over. So
I hope I'm not that person. Let's just say, I don't want to be that person.
This is awesome. And we love talking about leadership. And we've not ever done an episode directly 100% about the topic of leadership. So I'm really excited to talk with you today. Why don't you, just for the audience, give us an overview of kind of who you are and how you got into church leadership?
Yeah, that's awesome. Thanks, Frank. I never anticipated being in full-time ministry. I actually went to college in Tennessee, wanted to work in the music business. So I worked for a Christian record company for about a decade before I was ever in ministry. So that's a little fun fact of my backstory.
In Nashville?
In Nashville, yes. I worked for a company called Forefront Records, and was kind of my dream job. I mean, when I was a 13-year-old kid, I said, I want to work for this company. I didn't even really know what they did or, how things worked behind the scenes. But I was a big fan of Christian music. This was back, if you think of Christian music of the 90s and early 2000s, that was the era that I was there. And absolutely loved it. Yeah. So fans of, DC Talk or Audio Adrenaline, Rebecca St. James, that kind of era of Christian music was the heyday for me. But loved it. Thought I was living my dream job. And my husband and I were a part of a church plant in Nashville. And so, early, they're the first 30 people that were helping dream up a church that is called Crosspoint Church.
Okay.
And, we just thought we'd be good, faithful volunteers, so for all the church leaders here, we thought we were, those people who would just faithfully serve and showed up and.
And we have a lot of church plants that use Tidely too. So that kind of church plant, the planting team,
yes.
I'm sure there's a lot of folks that can totally connect with that story.
Well, and I resonate and have so much compassion for church planters. Like you guys are remarkable and just your passion and heart for getting a church started. And so that's how I got started in ministry. But a few years in, the church was growing pretty rapidly, and I got invited to come on staff as executive director. So I reported directly to the lead pastor and helped oversee the staff and all the operations of the church. And we grew over 9 years. We grew from about 500 in attendance. That's the size we were when I came on staff, to over 6,000 at 6 locations. So it was just a crazy rocket ride of growth. And there's all kinds of good and bad that comes with that. But just a privilege to be a part of a church that was, really having an impact in the greater Nashville area, and being able to be directly connected to ministry was something I never dreamed of, but had just the remarkable privilege of being a part of. And so then I went and spent a couple years as executive pastor out in California at Menlo Church. And then now lead a company called the Foresight Group. And we work with churches and some nonprofits, faith-based leaders around leadership development and team culture. And so that's what I do today.
That's very cool. Random side note: we have Tidely has quite a big team in Nashville. So we probably have, I don't know, 30 or so, maybe more employees in Nashville. So it
Cool.
wouldn't surprise me if someone on the Tyler team goes to Crosspoint.
I would say that's probably quite likely. That'd be fun. I'm sure we'll find a connection in there. That's great.
Totally. Well, tell us, you kind of jumped into, Foresight Group and what you're doing today. What got you kind of passionate about the topic of leadership?
Yeah.
On that path.
I think growing up, I grew up in a very small town, very rural community. And I don't think I really knew much about leadership, although of course I had seen plenty of examples of leadership. But when I really dove into my career at the music company, I kind of came just face to face with the reality that I didn't really know what leadership meant or what it meant to be a great leader. Mm-hmm. And very distinct story from, I was probably 22, 23. I had just been promoted into a position of manager, had my first employees that reported to me. And, so I was eager to prove myself and very driven A-type personality. And a couple of weeks into this new role and responsibility, and it's not going well. I mean, just like my team's frustrated, I'm frustrated, just nothing is going well. And so I go to my boss, who is the vice president, and I just say, hey, this is not working. And basically I was telling him we needed to fire everybody and get a whole new team, because clearly it was them and it wasn't me.
These people are terrible. Get them all.
These people are terrible, right? Leadership would be great if it wasn't for the people. And my boss looked at me and, and granted, this is a corporate context. Now, we were a Christian division. So I really did work with some wonderful, godly leaders. And he looked at me and he said, Jen, if you want to work with widgets, go work in a factory. But if you want to work with people, you're going to have to learn how to love them, to lead them.
Right.
And, so here I am, corporate context, and my leader is telling me, hey, leadership starts with love. Right. You have got to learn how to love people in order to lead them. It isn't about barking orders. It is about really seeing people and bringing out their best, their gifts, their strengths, etc. So that just set me on a trajectory, Frank, of just saying, I need to learn what leadership looks like. I need to understand. I need a philosophy of leadership. I need to know what I believe about leadership, because I just really hadn't thought about it. And, every church leader watching this knows that leadership is hard, it is challenging, it is messy, it is complicated. But the privilege of leading others is such a gift. And when I kind of stumbled into this, realization that I had a lot to learn, I quickly picked up some John Maxwell resources, which, he's just, brilliant on this topic. And he says leadership begins with influence. And so then I kind of zeroed in on that word influence. I was like, okay, what does influence mean? And influence means the power to change or affect someone. And that realization just kind of just hit me like a ton of bricks. It was like, you know what? If we as leaders have influence, and influence means the power to change or affect someone, how we steward our leadership really determines whether that influence is going to be for good or for bad.
Right.
And, most of us can name stories of leaders, people who had influence in a not so healthy way and kind of demotivated us, discouraged us. And then some of us can look at people who had this extraordinary influence in our lives.
Right.
And so I said, I want to aim for that extraordinary part. I want my influence, that power to change or affect others, to be extraordinary. And it just really impressed upon me the sacredness of leadership. And that's been the pursuit since then. I haven't gotten it right. Lots more fumbles, but that's my heart and passion.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. I love you kind of started off talking about how your boss from way back in the day said, look, if you want to work with people, you got to learn how to love them. Or you've got to love working with people, or something to that effect. And I can think about, just real quickly, right? Some of the sort of men in my life over the years that have been big impacts, big influences on me in terms of, I would say leadership just in the form of mentorship and helping me grow as an individual. 100% learned the most, got the most out of the people that invested in me and really loved me, really cared about me, right? Whether it's in the professional context or the church context or the just life, marriage context, wherever it's at, it's I could tell you all the guys that like they're mentors, whether there was some official title or not. Like,
Yeah.
it's because I felt how much they cared and how much they loved me, and like was open to like receiving that kind of, you know, help from somebody. So I think that's such a critical point to the whole thing.
Yeah, it really is. It was that recognition that leadership isn't really about me or for me. It's not for my goals and accolades and pursuits. Like, and I think we kind of mistakenly assume that leadership means power and position and all those things. But in my view, leadership really is an act of love and serving of others. And, you know, one of the things that I did on the heels of that conversation with my boss is I was just praying through it, just trying to understand, okay, clearly I'm missing something. I've got something to learn here. And I felt like God just impressed upon me to go back and read the Gospels and look at the life of Jesus. You know, how did he lead? What were his interactions like with people? And, you know, and just that recognition that he really saw people, you know, he really chose to love them and see them. And that influence earned him the opportunity to lead them. Yeah. You know, the influence came first, and the influence came because of relationship and because he had interest and he cared. Yeah. And so I mean, he
gave them all nicknames, and they had, you know, hangouts all the time. They went on mountains, they were camping, like, you know, he spent
That's right. He spent time. Yeah. You know, you look at his leadership and his life and his directives always came on the heels of time spent, you know, and it was much more about the relationship building, I think, than just what they were going to do. So anyway, it's a fascinating, I mean, it would seem obvious, right? Like, go look at the life of Jesus, you know, but like reading through the Gospels with the lens of how did he lead is a really fascinating way to read the Gospels.
Yeah. Love that. So talk to me a little bit. You help or coach or train, like your services come into all kinds of organizations, churches and ministries being one of them.
Yeah.
So what's unique about helping church leaders or helping leadership in the context of church?
Yeah, that's a great question. You know, I think that what I would say is that I think sometimes inside the church, we assume we lead people well because the church is about people, right?
Right.
And so because we're more of a people-centric organization, we sometimes assume that we've just got that. We know how to do people. But what I often see is that, especially among staff or key leaders, sometimes we are missing some of the key leadership development things we could be doing to invest in, to coach, to train, to develop. We kind of just assume people have it. And that's the opportunity I see in the church, is a little more intentional development of our staff, key leaders, et cetera. One of the ways that I look at this is I think there are three like core, I call them building blocks to organizational success or growth, however you want to define it. But really there's three key things. There's a sense of purpose. So if you visualize like three building blocks, there's a sense of purpose. We need to have a clear mission, vision, values that drive us. And as churches, we get that pretty solid, you know, like we're pretty clear on our mission. And then the third building block is like strategy or the plan, if you want to use P's. And so we often jump there, you know, as we start our churches, we're leading our churches, we know our mission, we have that clear sense of purpose, and then we jump to strategy. How are we going to achieve this mission? And so we work on our outreach strategies, you know, digital strategies, all these different things that help us achieve that mission. But the building block in the middle, and I say it's really the linchpin that aligns the two, is our people. And it's the dynamics of our culture, meaning our leaders and our teams. And how well are we training, developing, coaching, and leading them? And what often happens is, and I saw this, you know, in the fast growth that I was a part of at the church in Nashville, is we had a clear sense of purpose and we jumped to strategy. And we saw tons of momentum, you know, in the fast growth and all those things. But what happened is we hadn't developed our people enough. We hadn't done, you know, good work around self-awareness, team dynamics, leadership development, communication, collaboration, like fundamentals of how teams work together. Yeah. We had neglected those things because we were spending all our time on strategy. And what happened is that as the weight of that continued to grow, this began to, like, you saw the fractures. Like, you started to have a team that used to be really aligned and well connected was starting to feel divided. You start to see the tension grow. You start to see some leaders burn out. And so that middle building block is the place where we love to come and serve leaders, help them with their leadership development strategy, help them assess their staff culture and their team dynamics, and anticipate, hey, what do we need to do to grow together and be a healthier and a more effective team so that strategy has a solid foundation that's connected purpose.
Right. I want to sort of talk about what healthy leadership looks like. And have you kind of walk through that a little bit, but it makes a ton of sense. Like, I even think about it in the context of Tithely and our team, and, like having the core leaders at Tithely, be great friends, like enjoy being around each other, aligned with where we're headed, really connected and talking to each other often. And we're all remote. Like, we're a remote company. We don't have offices.
Yep.
There's no in-person meetings. We try to do some stuff, but it just resonates when you talk about the team and the people, whether it's in a church or a business, that are kind of in that leadership function. Those folks being really connected and really kind of working in concert together and feeling like they're doing it together and feeling like we're all in this together. I can only describe it in the form of a feeling. You probably have better language for it, but it's magical when that's happening, right? It really is, because you feel like you can conquer the world, and you've got all the people around you that you need, and everybody's, in it together. I say all that to sort of get into, like, what's healthy leadership look like? How do leaders get their teams there?
Yeah, such a great question. And we all kind of know it, don't we? Like, we feel it. You're like, when you're a part of a team that has that level of alignment, we're for each other, we believe in each other. It's just inspiring. And you're just committed to even working harder and doing whatever it takes to make that mission happen. And then we've also probably all experienced teams where it's like, it's just, you don't look forward to going to the office or getting on the Zoom call. You don't look forward to being together because you really just haven't built that relationship and camaraderie. And so, we all long for that. And I honestly think, and the research bears out that when we give the time and attention to building a healthy team, we get greater productivity, we get greater engagement, and ultimately we achieve our mission more effectively.
Right.
But so how do you do it? I think one of the key things is, first of all, for leaders to be aware that we do need to give disproportionate time and attention to developing our team. It's one of the things that I see, especially when you're in a high growth season, or when you're just in the early stages of like church planting, and you're kind of, you don't feel like you have margin for any of that stuff, and you're just trying to keep your head above water.
You're like doing the job. Like, you're like training the team ends up being the last thing on the list.
Exactly. And it really needs to be the first thing on the list. So that perspective shift is really, really key. And that leaders need to understand that their best contribution is the development of their team and of their key leaders. Yeah. So right off the bat, you've got to be thinking through who are your key leaders that you're going to give disproportionate time and energy and investment in them, so that they can then lead others, they can help accomplish the work. Yeah. I can remember a very specific season where this happened for me at the church in Nashville. And we'd gone through a big growth spurt. And my day was just filled with meeting after meeting with the staff team, of just trying to help give them direction and coaching and, answer questions, et cetera. And I would get to the end of the day and I would not have crossed anything off of my own to-do list. And I'm a get it done girl. Like, I love that check it off list kind of feeling of that concrete accomplishment. And I was getting really frustrated because I felt like I wasn't doing my work. And it was a conversation with a mentor who was like, Jen, the development of your team is actually your work.
Right.
You've got to keep working to delegate some of those details and things, because giving that coaching and that direction to your team is your best contribution. They need your time and energy. Here's a simple thing that I would tell leaders. You need to have one-on-one meetings with your direct reports.
Right.
That simple task, this seems really simple, but you would be shocked at the number of leaders who don't have intentional one-on-one meetings with their staff. Yeah. I remember when I went on staff at the church in Nashville, and I had come from a big corporate environment. When I came on the staff, there were 5 or 6 of us on staff. And so I reported to the lead pastor. And what I just discovered is he had no rhythm for like regular meetings. And I finally said to him, I need a 1-hour meeting once a week. Like, this is all I'm asking for, is in order to do my job well, I need 1 hour of your time once a week. I promise you, I will use this time effectively. I will ask good questions. I want to learn from you. I want to get good insight. But if you will give me that 1 hour of dedicated time, it will give me the fuel I need to do my job the rest of the week.
Right.
And that's what leaders need to realize, is that especially your direct reports, they need time with you regularly so that they are hearing your thought. They are learning how they're hearing your thoughts. They're learning how you think, and you're making sure you're aligned, because then they're going to be able to continue to do the work you need them to do. But it's one of those things that leaders,
because you have to be, right? You get, like, I get it, right? You get busy, and
Yep.
and maybe for some it's not what they love. Like, there's probably different reasons, but you get
Yep.
busy and you're like keeping a consistent one-on-one meeting with your direct reports. And if all of a sudden you have too many and you haven't worked out the org structure in a proper way, or
exactly,
what, for whatever reason, you end up like they slide, because it's hard to stay committed to that. But it's important.
Well, and then you start going, why did they make that decision? I can't believe they did that. Because it's not aligned with what you, and this is really key to team dynamics and culture. You as the leader intuitively know how you do things, right? You have a set of values that are driving your decision making, whether you've actually even brought them to the surface for yourself or you've articulated them to the team.
Right.
And at least if your team members have regular time with you, they're getting a chance to hear those things. Right. Even better if you start trying to really define those. And I'm a big believer in, leaders need to define this set of values that shape culture. This is how we work together. This is what's important for us. We're going to believe the best about each other. We're going to share the last 10%. We're going to be generous, fill in the blank with whatever is really meaningful to you. Yeah. But that's another key piece that helps drive great team dynamics and team culture.
Do you work with staff and leaders to help them actually put that stuff down on paper?
Yes. Yeah.
I think I wouldn't know this because I've worked with 10,000 organizations directly, but my small sample size is, I think that's actually hard for people to do, because so much of it is kind of your own, it is your intuition, it is your way of doing things that just happens for you.
Yep.
And that's what comes out, because that's you. But imparting that to other people, unless you spend a lot of time with them, is nearly impossible.
Yeah.
Right. So writing it down
is huge.
And getting it out of somebody, right? I'm trying to think, if you asked me to do something like that, it would take me a long time, because I'm not sure I could articulate it to you in one fell swoop. Like, you probably have to have a bunch of meetings to help people identify that stuff and put it on paper.
Yeah, Frank, you're exactly right. Like, you're so right. Because what happens is it's in you, and you instinctively know why you do things the way you do them. And in the early stages, when there's just a few, staff members, team members, they're kind of catching it. Like, even if you can't articulate it, they've spent enough time with you that this is how Frank would make that decision. I know Frank would do this. He would not do that, because they've had enough time to just kind of pick that up. Where this really breaks down, and this is oftentimes where, where people engage us, is this team's gotten big enough and there's no way that that senior leader or even, team of leaders can get time with all of those staff members to the degree that they would kind of instinctively be picking up what you value. So you're exactly right. Like drawing that out and making you really think about it. Okay, you just made a decision there about whether the wall is gray or blue.
Yeah.
Why? Like, why? And, and they'll be like, what do you mean? Well, of course we would paint it gray, not blue. Or, we laugh because that's a small example, but there was something intuitively in you as a leader that said it's this, not that. And you can like make that snap judgment. And here's the problem. Then every decision has to rise all the way to you as the senior leader because, again, because of growth and complexity, we don't have the luxury of being able to decipher that for you. So then we default to just, okay, well, I guess Frank needs to make that decision. Okay, Frank needs to make that decision. And so everything bottlenecks with you as a leader. Right. So and that's exactly what we do. If we can help you extract that, and we have, a lot of different ways that we help you just kind of think about it. What are those values that guide how you think, how you work, how you behave? Then we can bring those more to life, and we can teach the team those principles, and they become the filters for decision making that help get your team more aligned and working together. So such good. Sorry. Clearly I'm passionate about it.
Yeah. So I know in one of your books, I believe you talk about the 4 dimensions of an extraordinary leader.
Yeah.
What are those?
Yeah. Great. This kind of goes to some of the conversation we had earlier, but in that desire to figure out what great leadership looks like, I went back through the Gospels, was rereading the Gospels, and I came to, I was in the book of Mark, and it was where Jesus is being asked questions about taxes, resurrection. Remember they're throwing kind of those zingers at him just to kind of see what he would say. And then they ask him, what's the great commandment? And he replies with, love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind, and with all your strength. Yeah. And then, of course, the second is love your neighbor as yourself. And so when I was really looking at leadership through that lens of love, I came back to the great commandment. And I thought it was I got curious about the fact that it isn't just love God and love others like we all put on our church walls. Right. It was love God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength. Right. And so those are the 4 dimensions that I really think that great leadership is a reflection of the great commandment, where we're loving others with our heart. We're building relational connection. We're seeing people as humans. We're loving and leading others with our soul. So our spiritual awareness, our walk with God is informing how we lead. Mm-hmm. We're leading others with our mind, which is just that strategic side of leadership that, there are decisions to make, there's stewardship decisions to make, there's discipline required to lead well. So we're leading with our mind. And then 4th, we're leading with strength. And in the context of leadership, I look at strength through the lens of vision. Proverbs tells us that without vision, people perish. Yeah. And so we provide strength for our team when we lead with a clear, compelling vision. And so those are the 4 in a really quick nutshell. It's really leading from the great commandment.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, so much to thinking about it with the lens of leadership and reading through that and trying to apply it is super practical.
Yeah.
Connected, right, to kind of Christian leaders.
Well, and it takes the complexity out of it, because I think sometimes we try to come up with these grand ideas of what leadership looks like. And it's like, oh, you know what if we just took it back to the great commandment? Mm-hmm. Love God, love others with all of who he's created us to be. Right. And encapsulated in that are these different components, the dimensions that really shape, I think, what great God honoring leadership can look like.
How do you help people who, for whatever reason, are not natural born leaders? And I mean that they're not actually that, but they feel they're not that way, or they think they're not that, or whatever. But, how do you help develop leaders that, don't think they're natural born leaders?
Yeah, I think, my first, sometimes the leadership word can be overwhelming, and some people don't like the leadership word, probably because they've seen some poor examples, et cetera. And I really just remind people, leadership starts with influence, and all of us have a sphere of influence. So whether it is, just our immediate families, our neighbors, our friends, our coworkers, we all have circles of influence. So there is not a human who does not have influence with someone else. Like, we have influence. And leadership is really just about being intentional to steward the influence that you've been given. So whether that is, just with your family and really being intentional with that influence and helping lead them, if it's with a neighbor or a friend that you just have some influence with, and, you might be able to speak into their world, or if you're, a church leader who has a team of staff and volunteers that you're responsible for, it's just recognizing that it starts with influence, and it's really about stewarding that. And then everything else, I think, kind of takes care of itself.
Yeah. How do you help a church leader kind of get started with some of this stuff? Like, where would you come into the church and kind of start helping a team? What does that look like?
Yeah. So, it can come a variety of different ways. Sometimes it's just a leader who says, hey, I want to do some one-on-one coaching. I just, help me discover how am I doing as a leader? We have some assessments and different tools to kind of help you look at, hey, how are you doing as a leader? What do you, where do you need to grow? We all need to grow, by the way. So that's not a it's a where.
Yeah.
And so a lot of times people will come to us and just be like, you know what, I just need to do some one-on-one coaching to help me look at my leadership and help me take some steps in my growth as a leader. Right. A lot of times senior pastors will bring me in and say, hey, help us do a deep dive. I know stuff isn't quite right with my team. When I think about that culture, that people block in the middle, I can feel it's shaky. I can feel like there's some cracks, it's not quite right. And so then we can come in and we can do like a full, often will help do a staff culture assessment, where we do a survey to get a pulse on how are your staff feeling? What are they experiencing? What's good? What's not so good? And it's not all about pointing out all the bad stuff. It's like what's the good and the bad, because that's true of every team. There's no perfect team. So we come in and we help assess what are the dynamics of your team right now. And then help you define, okay, what do you hope for? What's the vision of your ideal team? Right. And then we help you build a plan to shorten that gap and then coach you through the implementation. Yeah. So that's a little bit more a deeper process, but it's a really valuable process to just get assessment of where are we and where do we want to go, and then build a plan to get there.
Yeah. I love that. In all of your work, I always love to know about kind of the issues. So what's one of the biggest mistakes, or, the greatest mistake that you see leaders make?
That's a great question. Assuming their team and their culture are okay. So here's the problem. When we're in a more senior leadership position, so whether you're the senior pastor of your church or you're the head of a ministry or department, it always feels better to us than it feels to the rest of our team. Mm. And we just need to know that, because because whatever position we're in, we are setting the tone and the temperature for we have control, right? Of, to a degree. We have more control here than somebody at another layer in the organization has. And so it always feels better to us than it does to the rest of the team. And so we have to keep a posture of humility and curiosity to go, hey, it's probably not as good as I think it is. And not that I want you to be like super paranoid, but I often see leaders assume it's great when it's really not. Right. And that would be my caution and my concern, is that oftentimes leaders assume it's great until it really unravels and they have a bunch of turnover, or a really key staff member leaves and they're completely surprised by it, or they burn out themselves. And so just the biggest mistake I see leaders make is assume it's good when it might not be so good.
Right. It's like that self-awareness isn't the right word, but it's that awareness, and having humility to not just think everything's great because you feel great about it all, but really, and I think that's where, even tying back into having one-on-ones and building the relationships with your team, and like being around and talking to people and having that kind of communication where they feel like they can talk to you about anything. And so you really know how things are going. And also, your direct reports or the people on your team usually paint a better picture to you than what's happening in reality. You know, there's a little bit of that happens too.
It's hard to get the truth as a leader.
Yeah.
It really is. So you've got to kind of assume that you're not hearing all of it. You got to dig more for like all the dynamics that are going on.
Right. Well, this has been great. To wrap it up, what's your top leadership book?
Oh, good question. So my all-time favorite it's an older John Maxwell book, but it's the 21 Most Powerful Minutes in a Leader's Day.
Okay.
Now he has a bunch of 21 something books, but this is the 21
small ones. That one rings a bell.
You know what? It's been republished in a few different formats. I have the original hardback, which is actually a pretty big book.
Okay.
But here's what I love about it. It's 21 Most Powerful Minutes in a Leader's Day, and it's written kind of in devotional style. And every week he looks at a different leader from Scripture and applies one of his 21 laws of leadership to that leader and how they lived it or didn't live out that law. Right. So it takes practical leadership stuff and helps us look at it through the lens of a person in Scripture, which I think is just really powerful for us as Christian leaders.
Yeah, 100%. Jenny, you've been a pleasure to talk to. Where can folks go to learn more about you and your company and how you help churches with leadership?
That's awesome. Well, Frank, thanks for this. It's so great. I'm loving the conversation. Our website is getforesight.com. It's the word get, G-E-T, the number 4, and the word sight, S-I-G-H-T, getforesight.com. And that's the best place to go and just learn about what we're doing. There's a ton of free resources there. In fact, in the free resources section, there is a workbook on defining your values. So since we had so much of a conversation around that, there's a great free resource there that you can check out. And then I'm just at Jenny Catron on all social media. So I'd love for y'all to follow and connect there.
Yeah, I love that. Thanks for joining us. I know the audience had a great time. I mean, so much good stuff. And I feel like it's one of those shows where we could keep talking, but I told you we keep it to 30 or so minutes. And I think we're at 40. So we're going to
So
cut.
I talked too much. That's what
we'll do a round 2 at some point, and have you back. So super appreciate it.
Thanks so much, Frank.
All right. Thanks everybody for joining. We'll see you next week on another episode of Modern Church Leader. Have a good one.